first thing I want you to understand is that I am not a suspicious person by nature. I raised two children in this house. I cooked Sunday dinners for 31 years in the same kitchen. I kept the same neighbors, the same church, the same grocery store on Millbrook Avenue where the cashier knows my name. I am not someone who looks for problems where there aren't any. My late husband used to say that was my best quality and my worst one, depending on the week. So when my daughter started bringing me my evening pills, I didn't think twice about it. That's the part people find hardest to believe. When I tell this story, and I've told pieces of it to my pastor, to my doctor, to my closest friend Nora, the first thing they ask is always some version of the same question. How did you not see it sooner? And I understand why they ask. I asked myself the same thing, sitting alone in my kitchen at 2 in the morning after everything had come apart. But here's what I need you to understand, if you're going to understand anything about what happened to me. When someone loves you, when they have always loved you, when you have watched them grow from a baby into a grown woman, when you have been through grief together and hard years together, you don't look at them and see a threat. You see your child. That's all you see. And my daughter had always been attentive. That was never the issue. Her name is Nadia. She's 41 now. She was always the one who called more, visited more, remembered more. When her father passed 3 years ago, she was the one sleeping on my couch for the first 2 weeks because she didn't want me to be alone. She drove me to every appointment. She cried more than I did at the funeral, which surprised me at the time. But grief is strange and it moves through people differently. Her husband, Greg, had always been quieter, polite but not warm. The kind of man who gives you a hug at Christmas that lasts exactly 2 seconds and then steps back and talks about the weather. I never had a problem with him. I just never felt like I fully knew him. They had been having financial trouble for about a year before they asked to move in. I knew about it in the vague way that parents know things, bits and pieces. Things half mentioned over the phone, a tone in Nadia's voice when money came up. They had overextended on a house in Clarkston they couldn't really afford. Greg's company had downsized. She was working, but not enough to cover everything. When she called and asked if they could stay with me for a while, just until they got back on their feet, just for 6 months or so, I said yes before she finished the sentence. Of course I said yes. She's my daughter. They moved in on a Saturday in early September. 2 cars worth of boxes, a storage unit for the rest. I gave them the guest room and the room I used as a sewing space, which became Greg's home office. I rearranged my whole house for them. I didn't mind. That's what you do. For the first few weeks, it was fine. Better than fine, actually. Having people in the house again felt good. I'm 67 years old and I had been living alone since my husband passed, and the quiet had become something I was used to but never fully comfortable with. Having Nadia in the kitchen in the morning, hearing conversation at dinner, it felt like something I hadn't realized I was missing. The vitamins started about 3 weeks after they moved in. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had been watching a show I liked, one of those British baking competitions, and Nadia came into the living room during a commercial and sat down next to me on the couch. She had 2 white capsules in her palm and a glass of water. "Mom," she said, "I've been worried about you." I turned from the TV. "Worried about what?" "Your energy. You seem tired all the time." I was reading about magnesium deficiency and it fits. Trouble sleeping, low energy, muscle aches. "I picked these up for you." She held out her hand. "They're just supplements. Totally natural." I looked at the capsules. They were plain white, no markings. "What brand are these?" I asked. "Just a store brand," she said. "Nothing fancy, just magnesium and B12. They'll help, I promise." I took them. Of course I took them. Of course I took them. She was my daughter, and she was worried about me, and she was holding out a glass of water and looking at me with that same expression she used to have when she was 12, and convinced I needed to eat more or sleep more or take better care of myself. She had always been like that, a little mother, even as a little girl. So I swallowed them without another thought. She started bringing them every evening after that. Always around 9 o'clock, always 2 capsules, always with water. It became a routine so fast I barely noticed it happening. She would come in, say goodnight, hand me the pills, wait while I took them, and then head to bed. Greg was usually already upstairs by then. It went on like that for about 6 weeks. I want to try to explain what those 6 weeks were like because I think it matters. I wasn't dramatically different. I wasn't stumbling around or confused or unable to recognize people. It wasn't like that. It was more like a dimming, like someone had turned a dial down just slightly on everything. My thoughts were a little slower. I slept more than I usually did. I forgot small things, where I'd put my keys, what I meant to say in the middle of a sentence. I chalked it up to grief, to age, to the change in routine from having people in the house. My neighbor Connie mentioned it to me once. We were standing at her fence talking, the way we always did on Wednesday afternoons, and she said, "Are you feeling all right? You seem a little off." I told her I'd been sleeping badly. She nodded and didn't push. The night everything changed was a Thursday in late October. I had a headache that evening, which I almost never get. Not a bad one, but persistent. I was sitting in the armchair in my bedroom, the TV on low, and I was thinking I might just go to bed early. Nadia came in at the usual time, handed me the capsules, said good night. I took the glass from her and set it on the side table. And then, I don't know why, even now I can't tell you exactly why, I didn't take them. I held them in my closed hand while we talked for another minute, while she straightened the throw blanket on the foot of my bed, while she said to get some rest. After she left and closed the door, I opened my hand and looked at the 2 white capsules sitting in my palm. I thought about what Connie had said. I thought about my keys and the words I kept losing in the middle of sentences. I got up very carefully without turning on any extra lights, and I went to the bathroom. I wrapped the capsules in a small piece of tissue and I put them at the back of my medicine cabinet behind the cold medicine I'd had since the previous winter. Then I went back to my chair and sat there in the dark for a long time. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself this was what happened when you watch too many news stories about elder abuse and scammers and all the terrible things people did. I told myself my daughter loved me and would never, and the thought went no further than that. But I kept the capsules. 3 nights later I had 2 more. Then 2 more after that. I collected 6 of them over 2 weeks without saying a word to anyone. I went about my days the same as always. I made dinner, I watched my shows, I had coffee with Connie on Wednesday, I went to church on Sunday. I acted like everything was fine because I half believed that everything was fine, and the other half of me was too frightened to look at directly. The thing that finally made me look was a conversation I was not supposed to hear. It was a Sunday afternoon. Greg and Nadia thought I was napping. I had mentioned at lunch that I was tired, which was true, but I hadn't been able to sleep. I was lying on top of the bed covers, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, when I heard their voices in the hallway outside my door. My bedroom is at the end of the hall. Their room is the second door on the left. For them to be standing outside my door talking rather than in their own room made no sense, unless they had walked down to check on me and then stopped. I lay completely still. I could not hear every word. Walls and doors are not nothing, but I heard enough. I heard Greg say something about the account, and once it's in both names. I heard Nadia say, "Lower, she trusts me completely." I heard the word power of attorney, clearly because it was said in a normal voice, not a whisper. Like it was just a logistical detail rather than something that should not be discussed outside your 67-year-old mother's bedroom door. And then I heard Greg say she won't fight it. I lay there for another hour after their footsteps moved away. I didn't cry. I don't know why I didn't cry. I think I had moved past the part of myself that cries and into some quieter, cooler place where a person just starts to think clearly about what they need to do next. The next morning, after they had both left, Nadia to work, Greg to wherever Greg went, I got in my car and drove to the pharmacy on Dunmore Street, the one I had been going to for years where they know me by name. I asked to speak with the pharmacist, a kind man named Mr. Ellis who had been there for as long as I could remember. I told him I had some supplements I wanted to ask about. I took the tissue packet out of my purse and placed the capsules on the counter. He looked at them. He picked one up and turned it over. Then he said in a very careful voice, "Mrs. Harlow, where did you get these?" I told him someone had given them to me as a supplement. He asked if I'd been taking them. I said yes, for about 6 weeks. He asked how I'd been feeling. I told him about the fatigue, the forgetfulness, the low-level fog. He said he wanted to send these out to be analyzed properly, but that based on what he could see, the capsule composition, the weight, these were not standard magnesium supplements. He could not tell me definitively what they were right then, but he told me with great seriousness to stop taking them immediately and to call my doctor that afternoon. I drove home gripping the steering wheel with both hands. I called my doctor's office from the driveway. I explained the situation to the nurse, who put me on hold for 4 minutes and then came back and told me the doctor wanted to see me the next day. She also told me, and she said this gently, like she was choosing her words, that what I was describing was consistent with something she needed me to take seriously. I made the appointment. Then I sat in my car for another 10 minutes. I thought about my house, about the deed, which had my name on it alone, which my husband and I had paid off 6 years before he died, about my retirement accounts, my savings, the accounts at First National that I had been managing by myself since the funeral, about the power of attorney documents, which I had never signed, which I had never been asked about directly, until a conversation that was not meant for me to hear. I called my friend Nora. Nora is 72 and sharper than anyone I know. She had worked as a paralegal for 20 years before she retired. I told her everything, sitting in my own driveway, and when I finished there was a long pause on her end. Then she said, "Lorraine, listen to me. Before you do anything else, you need to call an elder law attorney. Today." Nora knew one. She gave me the number. I called from the driveway and left a message. They called back within an hour. I want to stop here for a moment because I think this is the part of the story that gets left out when people tell versions of it. The practical part. The part about what you actually do when you realize something like this is happening to you. Because I had always believed, in the vague way people believe things they've never tested, that if something went wrong, I would know what to do. I would call someone. I would handle it. But sitting in that car, I felt very small. I felt like 67 years of being a capable, independent woman had not quite prepared me for the specific terror of realizing that someone you love has been planning something against you, carefully, while sleeping under your roof. What helped me was having steps, things I could do in order, one, then the next. Call the attorney. Done. See the doctor. Tomorrow. Don't confront anyone yet. Don't change your behavior. Don't let them know you know. The doctor's appointment was on a Tuesday. She reviewed my symptoms, ordered blood work, and told me that certain compounds, she named several, could produce exactly the cognitive and energy symptoms I described and could be obtained without a prescription. She used the phrase intentional sedation very quietly, and then she looked at me for a long moment, and I understood what she was not quite saying out loud. She also put me in touch with Adult Protective Services. I did not know until that week how common this was. The social worker who came to my home on Thursday, when Nadia and Greg were both out, was a woman named Teresa, and she was experienced and direct and did not treat me like I was confused or overreacting. She told me she had seen versions of this story more times than she wanted to count. She told me the most important thing I could do right now was to protect my legal documents and my accounts. I had already started. The attorney had helped me put a freeze on any changes to my accounts. She had also told me very plainly that no one could establish power of attorney over a competent adult without that adult's willing, informed consent, and that if anyone had been planning to present me with documents while I was chemically compromised, that would constitute fraud. I sat with that word, fraud, for the rest of that week. By the following Friday, I had moved my important documents to a safe deposit box at my bank. I had changed the passwords on all my financial accounts. I had made an appointment with my estate attorney to review my will, which had not been updated since before my husband died. I had also decided what I was going to say. I waited until a Saturday morning when both of them were home. Greg was having coffee at the kitchen table. Nadia was in the living room with her phone. I had not slept well the night before. I had not slept well for several nights. I sat down across from Greg at the kitchen table first. He looked up and smiled. That same polite, 2-second smile. I placed the remaining capsules on the table between us, still in the tissue. He looked at them. His face didn't change right away, but something moved through it. Something quick. "These are not magnesium supplements," I said. "I had them analyzed." He started to say something. "I had them analyzed." He started to say something. I held up my hand. "I need you to go get your wife," I said. "Please." He went. When Nadia came in, she looked at the capsules first and then at me. And I saw something in her face that I had not expected, which was not guilt exactly, but something that looked more like relief, like she had been waiting for this, like some part of her had been wanting it to stop. I told them what I knew. I told them about the pharmacy, the doctor, the attorney. I watched Greg's face close off entirely, and I watched Nadia's eyes fill with tears, and I felt, I need to be honest about this. I felt grief, tremendous grief. Not fear anymore, not even really anger, just grief. The kind that comes from understanding fully what has been lost. "Why?" I asked her. Just that word. She looked at the table. Greg said nothing. She said we needed the house, Mom. We didn't know how else. She stopped. She started again. "I thought you'd just let us manage things. I thought it would be easier if you were just a little more—" She stopped again. "A little more what?" "A little more confused. A little more dependent. A little more dependent. A little more likely to sign something without reading it." I looked at my daughter for a long time. I thought about the 2-year-old who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the 12-year-old who made me take vitamins. The new irony of that was not lost on me, and I had to look away from her face before I said anything else. "I need you both to be out of this house by the end of the month," I said. "I've spoken to an attorney. I know what my rights are. This conversation has been documented." Greg looked up at that. "I'm not pressing charges," I said. "That is the choice I am making right now, and it is a choice I may revisit. But I need you out of my home." Nadia made one attempt to speak. I stood up. "I love you," I said, "and I cannot have you here." They were gone in 3 weeks. Greg left without speaking to me again. Nadia left me a card on the kitchen counter on her last day. I still have not opened it. It's in the drawer by the back door. I look at it sometimes and I think about opening it, and then I don't, and I close the drawer. That was 8 months ago. I have my house back. I sleep in it alone, the way I have for 3 years, and the quiet is still something I'm used to but not fully comfortable with. Some things don't change. My blood work came back normal by January, which the doctor said was consistent with the compounds clearing my system. My thoughts are sharper now. I notice it most in the morning. I wake up clear in a way I hadn't been for months without realizing it. I speak to Nadia on the phone occasionally. Short calls, careful ones. There is a version of a future in which we find our way back to something, and I try to keep a door cracked toward that version, though I cannot say how wide. I have told this story because I am not the only one. Teresa from Adult Protective Services told me that financial exploitation is the most common form of elder abuse in this country, and that family members are the most common perpetrators, and that most cases go unreported because of exactly the thing I felt sitting in my car that October afternoon: the grief, the disbelief, the ferocious desire for none of it to be true. If someone is bringing you medication and you don't know exactly what it is, ask. Look at the bottle. Call your pharmacist. That is not paranoia. That is your right. If your name is on accounts and deeds that you have earned, know what is in them. Review them. Keep copies somewhere no one else can access them. If you hear something that frightens you, trust that you heard it. You are not being foolish. You are not overreacting. You are not too old to manage your own life. I am 67 years old. I live in my own house. I know my own mind. I almost didn't. I've had 8 months now to sit with what happened. 8 months to go over it the way you go over something you can't quite believe you lived through, turning it in your hands, looking at it from different angles. What I keep coming back to is this: nothing that happened to me was accidental. And I don't mean that in a dark way. I mean it in the most practical way I know. Every piece of it. The way it started, the way it unraveled, the way it ended, followed directly from choices. Choices Nadia made. Choices Greg made. And choices I made, including the one that mattered most, the one I almost didn't make. The night I held 2 white capsules in my hand and decided for no reason I could fully explain not to swallow them. I think about that moment more than any other. How close it came to going the other way. How many nights I had already swallowed them without a second thought, because I trusted the person handing them to me. That trust was not stupidity. I want to be clear about that. Trusting your child is not a character flaw, but I also know now that trust, even without any watchfulness at all, can be used against you. Not by everyone, not even by most people, but by some. And you don't always see it coming from the direction you expect. What I've learned about myself through all of this is something I didn't expect to learn at 67. I thought I already knew who I was. I thought the hard years, raising children, losing my husband, managing everything alone after he passed, had already shown me what I was made of. And maybe they had, but this was different. This required something quieter than strength. It required the willingness to look at something painful and not look away. To follow a thought I didn't want to have all the way to the end. Most of us, when something frightens us, we find a way not to finish the thought. We call ourselves paranoid. We call ourselves ungrateful. We tell ourselves we're imagining it. I almost did that. I came very close. What stopped me was small. A neighbor saying I seemed off, a headache on a Thursday, 2 capsules in my hand that I just didn't take. The smallest things can be the ones that save you. I think about Nadia too, about what it must have taken for a person to get from being the little girl who climbed into my bed during thunderstorms to being a woman who stood outside her mother's bedroom door and discussed her like a problem to be managed. That didn't happen overnight. That was a slow erosion of something, of the part of a person that says this is wrong, I cannot do this. Desperation can do that. Fear of debt, fear of failure. A husband who was too good at making a plan sound reasonable. I don't know the exact shape of it. I may never know. What I do know is that actions produce consequences, not as punishment, not as some force outside of ourselves keeping score, but simply because that is how things work. Nadia made choices, and those choices produced this outcome: a mother who loves her but cannot have her in the house, a relationship that may never fully recover, a version of her life that she will now have to build without the foundation she was trying to take. And I made a choice too that Thursday night. A small one, and it produced this. I am sitting in my own kitchen, in my own house, with my name on the deed and my mind clear and my accounts intact. I am not telling this story because I have everything figured out. I am telling it because I almost didn't figure out enough soon enough. And if one person hears this and asks a question they were afraid to ask, or checks a bottle they were told not to worry about, or calls an attorney when something feels wrong, then the hardest thing I have been through becomes something that mattered beyond just me. That is enough. That has always been enough.